Hey guys, Kevin Eastman for Homeland Season 5, Episode 3, Superpowers, and I was definitely looking forward to this episode. I mean, the season's been pretty good so far, and I have to say that at first I thought this episode was the best episode of the season, but then it took this one scene toward the end that was just so unusual and so out of place, to make me not actually really like this episode. I wasn't the hugest fan of this one, guys. I mean, I really liked it in the beginning, but towards the end, it got kind of just repetitive and annoying, and it seems like they're trying to do the same thing, which I understand, but it really took away from the episode for me. I will tell you guys some stuff that I really did like. There was some really great stuff in this episode that I definitely liked, but there was a lot of stuff that I didn't like. But the first, I'd say 40 minutes were really great. I really love the first 40 minutes. Basically, we start with Carrie. She's looking down at sleeping Franny, and she tells Jonas she doesn't know if she can put her on the plane tomorrow. And this is probably the most focused we've seen of Jonas and Carrie. We really haven't gotten to see a lot of them together, and most of this episode, Jonas and Carrie are together, most of it. And I like seeing that because, we know that Jonas cares much for Carrie, and because we've had this time jump, we really haven't gotten to see the genuine love between these two, and you really do get to see that here. So he says to go with her, and Carrie says that that'll make her just as unsafe. And she says once Franny is back in the States, she can figure it out. Jonas asks what if the guy in Lebanon was lying, but Carrie says he wasn't, and he asks how she knows. They step out of her daughter's room, and Jonas says she's been holed up for 4 days, not saying anything, and needs to just talk to him and say the truth. And Carrie says that he was tortured, and finally admitted that she was the target, but was too scared to say who Saul paid him. And Jonas says how that makes it credible, and she says that he had two secrets. One he could tell and one he was willing to die for, and then he says he did die for it and was shot in the face, and Jonas curses, and she says he asked for the truth, and obviously, that is the truth, and, that makes sense. So, a woman hands her son some lunch money, and he heads off with his friends, and someone's watching from nearby, and it's Quinn watching from a car. Obviously, this woman is Quinn's next target, because we know, Quinn now has this kill list, and Carrie we know is on that list, but this woman obviously is the next person to kill. So Saul goes to see During, who says that he rarely gets visits from CIA officers, and I like seeing During and Saul meet up because this is Carrie's old boss meeting with her new boss, and that's something I definitely love seeing. Saul says it's rare that German industrialists are the target of assassination, and obviously, we know that During was the target here, and he says he's more of a philanthropist, and Saul asks who might want to kill him in Lebanon, and then asks if he might have to do with Carrie, with being with Hezbollah, and During says to ask her, and of course we know that the person wasn't actually after During, they were after Carrie, and Saul says that says he can't find her, and then Saul says it's not the first time he's collaborated with the wrong side of history, and During says it's, his grandfather was a Nazi, and he says he has spent years atoning, and Saul asks about him giving to Muslim causes, and During says they account for every penny, then Saul asks if he considers Hezbollah a terror organization, and During says he's anti-terrorism, but says legitimate rebellion is different. And During says nothing has made the world more dangerous in the last 15 years than U.S. foreign policy. And he says Americans are great humanitarians when someone else is on trial. And Saul says he wants to know where Carrie is. And During says he doesn't track her movements and thinks she's taking some time off after what happened. And Saul says he wants to talk to her. During reminds him that Carrie doesn't work for Saul anymore and says he knows that must be frustrating since she's a remarkable person. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm starting to feel Stirring's kind of shady. I mean, his answers are very vague, and it kind of seems like, I don't know, maybe he's working with someone that made her be attacked. I kind of feel like that's what's going on here. I'm not really sure, though. Carrie stays a huge collage of photos she's put, especially because he didn't die, it just seemed kind of just like too soon and too perfect to be true. I don't really know. Something about During is just rubbing me the wrong way, and I don't know what it is. So Carrie studies a huge collage of photos she's put up at the house she's at, and all of likely terror suspects and people who could be after her, because she doesn't know who could be after her, so she's trying to figure out, who the hell's after me, and Franny comes out of her room, and I was shocked when we saw how old Franny is. Franny is about 4 or 3, she's walking, she's talking. I mean, the last time we saw Franny, she was a little baby, and now we're actually seeing Franny, walk and talk. Very interesting. I know it's been a time jump, 2 years, but holy shit, that kid has grown. Seriously, I was surprised by that. Jonas has her packed to go, and they drive to a small airport, load Franny onto a plane, and During says that During was actually lying to Saul since he's the one who's meeting her. And again, that's how I know that During cannot be trusted. Obviously, either he doesn't trust, obviously either he was intentionally lying to Saul, or he has a bigger plan for Carrie that we don't know about. I'm not really sure. Um, but I do know that I don't really trust During right now. Franny runs to the plane as Carrie tells During thanks. He says to get to the bottom of this, then come back to work, and Carrie says she will. And he tells her Saul came looking for her and to scare him. He says he told him nothing. She says she's sorry he had to lie to him, but he says he didn't mind and says Saul seems like a man used to getting in his way. And he tells her to tell Franny goodbye. And Jonas gives Franny a hug. Then Carrie says she's going to go see her Aunt Maggie and her cousins, and she kisses her, says she's sad for her to go. She hands her over to Anya, her sister, who tells her not to worry. They load onto the plane, and Jonas hugs Carrie as she starts to cry, and she goes back to the car. They drive back to the house as Carrie stares out the window, and obviously, it's really hard for her being a mother losing Franny, but also because she knows someone's after her. For all she knows, someone could target Franny, and you can definitely tell that's in Carrie's mind. She's trying to stay as calm as possible, and I really like seeing that here. And Jonas says saying goodbye to his kids and moving out was the worst day of his life, and she reminds him that he sees them on weekends, and he says she'll see Franny again, and she says he's not helping. He says that's because she won't tell him anything. And he says he's not a brain reader. And she laughs and says mind reader. I like the playful banter between Jonas and Carrie. And, even though it is serious what they're talking about, she's treating it as a joke because that she loves Jonas and she genuinely cares for him and says she knows she's not been herself the last few days. And he says he gets it. Carrie says it's more than sending Franny away. She says maybe he can help her see this better. She says it would ask a lot of him and he asks what he can do. And she has to stop to eat and she says they can't talk there. They sit at a table at an empty restaurant. She says she knows she's bipolar and says the meds keep her safe and sane. And she says what he doesn't know is what she's like off the meds, which of course he hasn't seen. And she says it can be scary as hell, but also exhilarating. And she says you feel elated like you're flying down a ski slope with no chance of falling. She asks if he'll still like her once she tells him this, and Jonas says he loves her. And she says the meds literally saved her life, but she loses something too. She says there's a window when she's lucid and does her best work. And she tells him about some of her successors, and he asks if she wants to go off her meds to figure this out. And she says she already did 3 days ago. So this episode, Carrie is off her meds, and we do get to see that, but that's partially what ruined the episode for me, is Carrie being off her meds. And I'll get to my big problem with that. But Allison checks with her people who report that Carrie hasn't been seen since she got back from Lebanon. And they tell her that Laura is on her email and they read what she types. Saul comes in and says During doesn't even know where she is. And Saul tells her they need to talk. And of course, like I said, Allison is becoming a really great character. I'm really loving Allison as a character. Definitely love what they're doing with her in this episode. And he says he's known Dar for 30 years and says he knows she tried to put a knife in his back. He tells her to stop it, then says if you aim to kill, don't miss, and asks if he's taught her nothing. And, she's pretty pissed at Saul, and he's pissed at her. And he says he treat her like an elite intelligence officer and says to behave like one. She asks when he wants her gone because he's literally treating her like he just doesn't want her there. It seems like he doesn't want her there. It seems like he wants Carrie back, and it doesn't seem like he likes Allison very much. I mean, he hasn't given her very much respect. He hasn't treated her very well. I like seeing Allison call Saul out for this. It's something that's definitely very interesting. He says they can't afford a shakeup right now. She asks who will be sacrificed for the Germans, and he says he's working on it. She thanks him, and he says that she doesn't deserve it. She doesn't deserve to be thanked. And Carrie and Jonas come back. She says if we'll monitor him, she can push the boundaries some more. And he asks for warning signs, and she can give him a list, including belligerent or abusive. And he laughs, but she says he can't get ugly. She says give her the pills once he knows it's time. And Jonas says she should have told him before she went off the meds, and she says sorry. She says the sedative is fast acting, and there won't be any crisis. He says there must be another way, and Carrie says not for her. She goes back into her room with the photos, tells him it's a timeline of her tours for the CIA, and she says she's making an enemy list of who has the means and contacts to make it start, and obviously she wants to know who this is. So Quinn's watching the woman from earlier. They're at a restaurant, and Quinn's German ex, Astrid, I think her name, yeah, Astrid, she's there, and he asks about Lebanon and if she has any idea where Carrie is, because obviously he needs to go after Carrie. He knows that she's his next target, and she says no idea, but a lot of people are looking for her. He says he is too. She says she thinks Carrie's back in Germany, and when Astrid said that, that's kind of an interesting answer. I mean, Astrid seems to know people are targeting Carrie, and I'm not really sure how she knows that, but somehow she knows that. So I don't know if Astrid is tied to the people that are targeting Carrie, but I don't fully trust Astrid after saying that. Quinn asks if she can get him a stingray, and she says yes. Then he asks her to leave with him. She says she can. He says handheld stingray if she can swing it. And Jonas and Carrie then have sex in her idea room. He says he's never had crazy Carrie sex, and basically, he's not used to her being crazy, obviously. So I thought that was kind of funny. At the During Foundation, the hacker sits outside, and Laura spots him. Some men sit across the street watching the place. He pulls out a computer, pops it open. Laura goes inside and up to her office. She opens her laptop. The fire alarm goes off, and she's told to leave. And she does so reluctantly. The CIA watches this and alerts Allison that the building is evacuating. She asks where Laura is and says to get the team onto the street to look for Laura and Carrie both. Laura comes out and stands in the crowd. The hacker's nearby and nods. Laura sees the CIA guy get out of the car. She goes to get a thicker crowd of people. The hacker walks and Laura follows. They cross the streetcar tracks and keep going. The CIA's lost her, and Allison's pretty annoyed about this because she obviously needs to target either Laura or Carrie, and they tell her, no Laura, no Carrie. If they're not going to find Laura, they're not going to find Carrie, and obviously it's not going to work. So Allison goes outside to stew, gets some fresh air, and she sighs, and definitely, Laura's in as bad a position as Carrie. Laura is definitely very much like Carrie. She's very shady. She's very, abrasive, and she's doing some things that are crossing some lines. Like I've said, Laura's crossing some lines, and it's gonna end up probably killing her. I honestly see Laura dying. I really do. But the hacker steps around a corner. I just read this, so basically, the hacker steps around a corner. Laura follows. She asks if he's who she thinks she is. She says it was a ballsy move setting off the alarm. And he says he was there when the BND picked her up. And he asks what she told him. And she says she told him nothing and says she doesn't even know his name. She says, of course, they're after him, but he's smart and tricky. And she says she'll protect him. And he asks how he can be sure. And she reminds him he came to her and he says he can read her stuff and thought he could trust her. And she asks his name and he says, call me Numan. And she says he's a fan. She's a fan of his too. Numan says he has the rest of the documents and she says she can release them like last time. And he asks if she gets scared and she says she can just go home to America. So now we realize that she's doing all this stuff to protect this guy Numan. She's obviously trying to protect them because they're being targeted, and I think that's really interesting. So we now realize that she's not just trying to stir up trouble. She's doing it to protect them. And she says she has 2 warrants out for her arrest there. He says he can't go home either. She asks Turkey, and he says yeah. He hands her the docs, and she says she has to go. She tells him he's doing the right thing, and she asks how she can reach him. And he says she can't, and he goes. So Carrie then takes a caffeine pill, crushes it, and snorts it. Jonas comes in as that's necessary, and she says she made progress after she went to bed and says he can make her coffee. She says this is faster. Laura comes back to her, and again, I like the playful interaction between them. Laura comes back to her office. She opens her safe. She gets out a second computer she has there and then makes a call. And Laura calls Jonas, leaves a message saying she needs him, asks where he is. And it seems like Jonas knows what's going on with her. She plugs the flash drive in, sees a portrait that giggles and flips her off. And she says, you little fucker. This guy did not give her the documents. Maybe he was trying to hack her computer. But Numan is not someone that she should trust. He obviously does not really trust her. And, like I said, it's not going well for Laura. So Numan meets his pal Corsi at the club and says he has to meet someone. He tells him it was Laura Sutton, and he says he gave her the documents. Corsi is shocked, and Numan says no more talk about selling him to the highest bidder. And Corsi calls him an asshole. Numan says it was the right thing to do. Corsi says he's a fool and doesn't even know what a fool he is. And Carrie then talks about Abu Nazir's bomb maker and says he had a son who would be 18 now. And Jonas says he knows the story and says it came up in her background check for during. And he says she barely got hired. He says the wife, Sana, blew herself up at a checkpoint, killed 3 soldiers. And she says Bazem should be on the list. And, she's thinking maybe they could be targeting her. She's not really sure who's targeting her. She's just trying to go through possible targets. That really is what she's doing here. So Saul talks with Itai about the business in Lebanon. He asks how this fits together, and Saul asks what, and the guy says Carrie was handling security and met with Walid from the Hezbollah, and he tells Saul that no one believes Carrie is not still agency. And the guy tells him that the Israel government will oppose any regimen change, and he says getting rid of Bashir is not a bad idea, but he can't be replaced with someone worse. And Saul says they're out of the business of overthrowing regimes, and the ambassador Scott is annoyed that he's being recalled and says Saul engineered this. He thinks that Saul's the one that started all this, and he says he won't go back. Saul says take it up with the State Department. The guy says that the president owes him, and Saul says not as much as he thinks he does. And obviously, which is obvious, and Jonas is then looking through some files she has and says there are hundreds of names there, and she says there are 167 names on that list, which is pretty incredible that 167 people could be targeting her. But again, it shows all the terrible things that Carrie's done and really does go with the theme of the season of why she doesn't want want to go back to the CIA because she doesn't want more people coming after her. He talks about how they're all civilians, and she says, according to Pakistani Foreign Ministry, they were all killed while she was station chief in Kabul by drones, and Jones is getting a little queasy about all this, and she asks what's wrong. She tells him to take a break, and he says he's fine, then gets snappy with her, and she says she can tell something is wrong. He says he's going to step out for a minute. She says he thinks she's appalling and repulsive, maybe even a war criminal, and he says to leave it alone. She says to say something, and he shakes his head at her, then walks to the door. She tells him that that's not her anymore. He says he doesn't know how she lives with herself, and I understand why Jonas obviously doesn't want to do this, but this entire thing that came up felt just like unnecessary drama for Carrie and Jonas. I didn't feel this need to come up. Jonas didn't seem to care that she did all these bad things. I don't know why all of a sudden he suddenly did. It just felt very out of place for me. And yes, I can understand the argument that, oh, he didn't really fully understand what she was doing. I get that, but this all just felt very unnecessary and just felt like we were adding some drama that we really did not need. And basically, she paced the floor, then sits with her knees twitching. She looks at the wall of photos. She tries to gain some focus. She does some deep breathing as she looks at all the faces on the wall. She paces, then goes to the kitchen. She sees a bottle of vodka, pulls it out, taps the bottle nervously. She opens it, takes a swig. That's 9 months of sobriety gone. And, this is the first drink she's taken in 9 months. And then she sees Ian talking to her. Ian is back in this episode. And this I really loved, I have to say. I really like seeing people that she knew that she hurt, she could possibly be targeting. But why Ian? I didn't fully understand why exactly she saw Ian, because Ian's not out there. Ian is dead. So why is she possibly thinking, Ian is coming after her? Because, he says so much for self-control. She covers her eyes, then he's gone, and I thought that was really interesting when we saw that. I mean, I guess she's thinking that maybe Ian's family could be targeting her. It felt unusual to go back to Ian and all that. And Corsi greets a man who works at the Russian embassy who's in the club. He asks if he's threatening him or trying to blackmail him. Corsi says he has documents for sale, American top secret. The guy gets close and says, tell him more. And Carrie starts talking crazy to one of the photos, says he's a loose end she should have killed, and Ian tells her that it wasn't that guy and says he doesn't even think of her, doesn't remember her name. And Carrie says his name, and he says Ian is Dustin is done. She asks what he wants, and he says ask him what she wants to know. And Carrie asks who is it and who's after me. He says come closer, and a whisper in her ear. She steps closer and he whispers to her. She starts crying, and again, this all felt really weird, and added this entire thing with her seeing Ian felt like a completely different episode than what we were getting. And it would have made sense if this was another episode. It just felt weird in this episode. At a German store, Quinn flashes a policy badge, grabs the kind of woman he was watching. He tapes him up with duct tape. He told the other kid to tell his mom that he was arrested. He tells the kid to shut the fuck up. And Jonas comes back inside, calls to Carrie, asks if she's hungry. And she sits in the middle of a circle of photos on the floor. And this is when things just got really, really weird. He kneels down. She says she figured it out. She says it's all of them. They're all coming after her. He asks what she means. She says it's the sum of her sins. And this I liked. I like her saying, look, they're all coming after me. And she says an avenging angel that says angels aren't good. She says it doesn't matter who it is because whoever does it by doing it for them all and says it's right. She says you can't atone that for many sins. He sits on the bed and goes to get the meds. And he can tell that she needs them. And, he can tell that she needs the meds right now. And he goes back to her. She asks if there's a church nearby. He tells her to take the medicine. She says no, and she's saying that she's not crazy, and it's crystal clear. And he says she solved it. It's time to go back on the meds. He says they agreed she would take them. And she asks if he gets tired of the Clark Kent routine. He says take them or he will call an ambulance. She says they'll find them. He says take the pills or we'll call. She offers sex. He says take the goddamn pills. This entire scene was so stupid. I'm sorry, guys. This felt completely unnecessary to me. If they would have just taken this whole thing out with him telling her to take the meds and just have her take the damn meds, it would have made more sense. And I get they're just trying to create drama here, but that's all it seemed like. It didn't really seem like it made sense with the character at all. It just seemed like, again, we're trying to go back to Crazy Carrie, which I thought was the opposite of what we're doing this season. I don't want to go back to Crazy Carrie. Crazy Carrie was something of the past. I want to see a different Carrie. And yeah, Carrie can be crazy and she can be, really paranoid and things like that. I'm fine with that. But I don't just want Carrie to be crazy to be crazy. It just felt like it came out of nowhere, and I really didn't like that. And I was hoping that Carrie would be able to control herself. And again, I get that she knows that people are coming after her and that she's doing this all off of meds, but this all just felt very unnecessary, and I didn't like this. She grits her tooth. shows him her mouth. He thanks her. She says, "Aw, poor little Jonas." She says she bets he never had a girlfriend like her before. She says she likes it better when he's mad because at least she knows he's alive. The burner rings and she says not to answer it. He says his ex, and that's whose kid that Quinn took, we realize. He took Jonas's kid, so that way, obviously, that would be a reason to get Carrie. And the ex-wife tells him that their son was arrested for shoplifting. Quinn sits outside listening to the call and get coordinates. Now, this I thought was really cool. I definitely really like that. He used the stingray to get the coordinates. Quinn leaves the kid in the van and says they'll find you by dinner time. He gets in the car and drives off, leaving the van, and Quinn is just a badass. I really love seeing the side of Quinn in this season. Jonas calls the police and says that's weird. He says the police have no record of bringing in his son. Carrie says he's not in police custody and says it was staged to get, and it was basically staged to get him to call. And he says Stefan will be fine. That's the name of his son. And he says they have to go back to Berlin, but she says he's just a pawn. And Jonas says it's his son. She grabs a bag, runs out into the woods, and this was just ridiculous. Honestly, this was ridiculous. I'm sorry. I mean, I would have been completely fine. If this would have been the end of the episode, her running off into the woods, I would have been fine with that. But it's not the end of the episode. There's more after this, and this was just like, this was unnecessary. It really was. Jonas yells her to come back, says he's not chasing her. He curses, asks where she is. She doesn't answer, gets into the car, drives away. She opens the bag, pulls out a rifle, and loads it. And I'm just thinking, Jonas, this is your fault. You're the one that reacted to Carrie, doing all these terrible things. He's the one that reacted to that. And again, it is Carrie's fault that she did these terrible things. But she really had no choice in some of these cases. She had a mission she had to fulfill, and it's very much like Quinn. He has a mission. He has to do it. And unlike Carrie, this does not get to him. This stuff does get to her, and we know that. And that's something I've always really liked about Carrie as a character, is how the emotional attachment she has. She obviously, that's why she left the CIA, is because of the emotional attachment she had to the people that she, was trying to kill or trying to protect or whatever. She had an emotional attachment to them, and you really see that here. And definitely, I really like that. But I don't like seeing Carrie just flat out crazy. It was really annoying. Saul sits at his desk making a video call to Dar, who says the ambassador is not happy to be on his way home. Dar says the Germans are appeased and asks if they should put an official reprimand in Allison's file. Saul says he needs her for the weekend if they're still on, and Dar says that's why he called. He asks if Dar has cold feet, and he says just the opposite. Dar tells Saul they will have a green light, but says he failed to mention the conversation with Etai, and Dar says screw them as long as the Israels don't know the who or when. And Allison tells Saul they lost track of Laura for 2 hours, and we realize that Allison and Saul are actually sleeping together. I don't know. I don't know how that makes any sense. I really don't, guys. I don't understand that. She says they're supposed to be professionals and says Laura could have met with Carrie. And that's something I do want to see. I do want to see Laura meet with Carrie. But this whole thing with Saul and Allison, again, just felt like unnecessary. A plot twist for the sake of a plot twist. That's all this felt like to me. And she said she took a Xanax and asked if it's okay. They just sleep. He says okay when they cuddle up. That's fun. And it was just weird. I mean, it's weird to see Saul with Allison. It's just very strange, especially because it didn't seem like he liked her very much. Why the fuck is he having sex with her? I don't understand this at all. Why is he doing this? Why would he choose her over any other woman, over anyone else? I would be fine if it was anyone else, but Allison doesn't make any sense. It doesn't go with her character at all. Again, it just felt like they're using these new characters just to create drama, and I like these new characters. I like Allison, I like Laura, I like Jonas. They're just not utilizing them very well in this episode, especially towards the end. They really just screwed up here. Carrie looks in the woods and it's dark now. She sees headlights as a car pulls up the road, then shuts off the light. She aims a rifle. She sees a guy lurking in a hood shirt, and it's Quinn. Quinn creeps closer cautiously. She watches through the scope. He has binoculars and a gun. She takes a shot at him. He goes down. She looks around and checks for the scope. She creeps closer to Quinn. She never saw his face when she shot. She doesn't know this is Quinn. She takes aim again. She gets closer. He's gone. He comes up behind her, chokes her. She goes limp, then he drugs her with her syringe. He says he was wearing a Kevlar vest, and he groans as he pulls off his jacket, and he says, motherfucker, and that's how it ends. And again, I was kind of pissed off with that because why did he have to find her in this episode? I wanted some build up to this, and he was very close to finding her, but then she got away, of course. But I didn't want them to really come into contact yet. I wanted this to take a little while, and it seemed like it took too long. My biggest problem with this episode is that the first 30 minutes I think were great. But the second that Jonas reacted to Carrie doing all these terrible things in the past, maybe he didn't know about it, but I didn't feel he'd react that way. I didn't feel he'd react in a way where he was really pissed off at her and everything. I mean, he doesn't really fully understand why she did all these things and why she had to do them. There were some things that obviously maybe she took too far, but that's how Carrie is as a person, and he needs to understand that, and he needs to respect that. I hope Carrie and Jonas are okay because I don't like this. I really don't like seeing Carrie and Jonas already possibly split up. It's stupid. I want Carrie and Jonas to stay together, and I really hope they're not rushing things because it seemed like this episode was extremely rushed towards the end. Saul and Allison sleeping together makes no sense to me whatsoever. I don't know why they're sleeping together, and it's just because the fact that he doesn't like her doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. If he doesn't like her, why the hell are you sleeping with her? I don't understand it, but whatever. I mean, just Homeland logic. It doesn't really make a lot of sense at all. I do like seeing Laura in the same position as Carrie, though. You know, she's being hunted down. She's obviously, there's some men after her that don't want her alive, obviously, and she's being targeted by some men, and she doesn't fully understand it. That, I think, is very interesting. I'm very interested in what's going on there. During is not to be trusted. I'm going to say that right now. During, obviously, has some sort of plan with Carrie. The fact that he lied to Saul, and the fact that he did this whole thing with Carrie just doesn't really work, and I'm trying to figure out really what he's trying to do here, and that's going to be very interesting. I do like seeing Quinn go after Carrie. I think that is interesting the way he's doing it. And he's not just, he's still going after despite the fact of the emotional attachment he has. He doesn't care. That's his job. He needs to do this. He doesn't care that he might have liked her. He needs to kill her because she's on his list. And to her, he's just another, to him, she's just another woman on the list. And I really love seeing that. I did like the genuine concern that Carrie had for Franny. I really like seeing that. I just didn't like Carrie going off her meds and acting all crazy and shit. It was stupid, and I felt like we were trying to deviate away from that this season. And this season this episode did the complete opposite of what I think we're trying to do this season, and I really had a problem with that. I mean, once a season, we always get a crazy Carrie episode. Last year it was Redux, which was an amazing episode, but that worked for that episode because Carrie was crazy. She was off her meds. People had stolen her meds and taken them from her. That was different. This was Carrie literally saying, I'm not going to take my meds, and then going crazy over it. It was ridiculous, and I felt very out of place, and it just feels like we're trying to get back to this plot point of stuff that we don't need and add unnecessary drama and get people to watch next week, and I definitely didn't like that. Of course, I'm going to continue watching the season. I just wasn't as big as a fan of this episode as I wanted to be. It started off fantastic. Everything in the beginning of this episode I thought was great, but then it really went downhill after Jonas found that thing with Carrie. It really went downhill after that. We'll have to see what happens. But let me know what you guys thought of this episode. I know this might have been a very strange episode. I really thought this episode was quite strange, but I will see you guys next week, which will be for the affair, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.